All right, we're going to pull the panel together. This is, what is this? 8, 7. This is panel 6 of 8, and it's going to be a really great one. We encourage folks to take their conversations to the exhibit space, ideally, so that you can check out all the super cool stuff that people have brought with them and learn about their additional, all of their offerings. So this is our rural energy panel. We love all of our panels at EESI, but historically, our organization has put a little bit of extra emphasis on rural issues and spent a lot of time thinking about rural clean energy in particular. For a long time, we've had a technical assistance program that have worked with rural electric cooperatives to do on-bill financing programs. Those came up in the last panel, were mentioned, and that's something that we've done for a long time. So this is a really exciting panel. I'm super eager to hear what everyone has to say. I'm Dan Brissett. I'm the president of EESI. This is, like I said, panel 6. We have 2 more panels after this. We're also hosting the exhibition that's around the corner in the Rayburn Foyer. And then at 5 o'clock, that exhibition space becomes a reception. And so if you're hanging around and you need a place to hang out, please join us for the reception. I think it will be a lot of fun. And we have a lot of great exhibitors, and it'll be great networking. A lot of congressional staff who are our main audience will be stopping by. I don't think we need to have any more ado. So I think we should just dig right in. We've got a great panel, and our first panelist is the president and CEO of the National Cooperative Business Association, CLUSA International. NCBA is a longtime, very close friend of EESI's, and Doug, it's always a real thrill to have you on the panel. And so I'll turn it over to you for your remarks.
Well, thank you, Daniel, and thanks to EESI for again putting together a great day on some really important conversations. Just real briefly, Daniel mentioned I'm from the National Cooperative Business Association. We are the apex association for all kinds of cooperatives. So farmer cooperatives, food cooperatives, worker cooperatives, housing cooperatives, energy cooperatives, including rural electric cooperatives. I'm going to spend a minute talking about. I think I'll get right to it. And when we think about energy efficiency, energy savings in rural places, we need to think about a couple things. First is that rural places are they're not monolith. They're a terrifically diverse set of communities in kind of every which way. But they do have something in common. The vast majority of rural places are served by energy companies that are owned and controlled by the people who live in those rural places. They're called rural electric cooperatives. That means, of course, it's business that's owned, controlled, and benefits the people who actually use them. There's about 40 million people in the United States who are part of this system. Another really important thing to think about rural places is that about 90% of all the persistent poverty counties in the country are in rural places. There is real significant economic challenges over the years in rural places, and the result of that is there's a lot of people with very little or no discretionary income, a lot of people who are living in housing stock that's really substandard, suboptimal, and that means there's a lot of people who are spending a lot of their money on energy. And no matter who, I think up here on the Hill, everyone would agree that that people in rural America, families in rural America, should be able to have as much money as possible to take care of the basics. And if in some estimates, up to 40% of rural households' income is spent on energy, that's too much. It's taken away from other things. So we need to look at strategies and how to deal with that. And one way is through the Rural Energy Savings Program, which we can get into more deeply. But essentially, it's a program that's been around for over 10 years now, 10 years. And it works with the USDA program, the Rural Utility Service Program. And they work with rural electric co-ops. And it's an on-bill financing program that helps rural households do some basic renovation that really makes all the difference in terms of savings on energy bill. Some estimates $1,000 a year, which for a poor household is a lot of money, and there's huge demand for that program, and it's really proven over the years to make a big difference to a lot of people, and I think over 25 states right now that it's been implemented. Maybe a little bit later I can talk about, it's a great program already. There's some ways it can be improved that can really make a difference for people in rural places. So thanks.
Thank you, Doug. That's a great way to kick off our panel. And next up, we're going to hear from Ben Longstreth. Ben is here in his capacity as a member of the board of directors of the Beneficial Electrification League. Ben, thanks for joining us today. I'll turn it over to you. Should be the green light.
There we go. Here we go. Much better. I'm Ben Longstreth, as Dan indicated, a board member of the Beneficial Electrification League, which is an organization that was formed out of a collaboration between the Natural Resources Defense Council, an environmental NGO where I used to work, and co-ops and their another of their association, NRECA, National Rural Electric Co-op Association, formed really out of a conflict that we were having over some Department of Energy efficiency standards, but that really helped us see tremendous opportunity from smart electrification projects, initiatives that could achieve multiple goals of saving customers money, reducing emissions, making the grid more resilient, and also enhancing or providing equal energy services to homeowners, customers. So Beneficial Electrification League works, or BEL for short, as I can't say that name, which doesn't roll off the tongue well, works with co-ops and other utilities in rural areas to try to support these opportunities. There have been a lot of changes in DC on the energy sphere over the last 2 years or so, but these opportunities for smart electrification really remain as important as ever, and something that really absolutely deserves to be taken advantage of. The beneficial BEL is really, in terms of the work it's doing, trying to kind of continue the work that the federal government and co-ops did in electrifying rural America initially, which created tremendous strength for the country and tremendous improvements in the quality of life in rural America. And we think that smart electrification can bring many more of those benefits. Beneficial electrification needs to, for BEL's perspective, meet 4 criteria, improve some of them, and make sure we don't cause problems with any of them. And I'll just run through those 4. The first is, again, saving customers money. As Doug indicated, particularly in rural areas, cost of energy is a tremendous part of people's budgets. Saving customers money is really a core goal, and there are a lot of opportunities to do that. Supporting grid resilience means that we're not making the grid work harder. We're not making the grid less reliable when we switch from a fossil energy producing or consuming device to an electric one. Cutting emissions is another core goal. The electricity system has been getting cleaner and cleaner over time, so switching from a propane or gas appliance to an electric one is going to just continue to improve from an emissions perspective. And again, we want to make sure that the customer experience is as good or better as with the traditional appliance that's being replaced. From just a practical perspective, if it's not, people aren't going to do it. So what are some examples of this? One core one that we started working on is the electric water heater. And if you co-ops were undertaking a project that initially was kind of in conflict with a Department of Energy standard for large water heaters. And what the co-ops were doing was managing the water heater so that they, the water heater would run only when electric prices were low. And because the water heater's large, you're able to not run, and the homeowners can still have enough hot water out of the water heater when electricity prices are high. This is a kind of demand response. There are a bunch of other options for this as well, all of which can help keep prices low, cut emissions, and keep the grid resilient. So thanks so much. Look forward to continued questions.
Thanks, Ben. We'll definitely come back to some of those points in the Q&A as well. Next up, we have Mike Lemon. Mike is the founder of BTR Energy. Mike, welcome to the Expo.
Thank you, Dan. Yes, I'm Mike Lemon. I'm the founder of Bridge to Renewables, otherwise known as BTR Energy. Started the company 10 years ago. To date, we manage about 500,000 vehicles in California under their low carbon fuel standard, generating carbon credits under that framework. The company's genesis, however, was really what I'm here to talk about today, which is the renewable fuel standard and its electric pathway. You'll have to bear with me. It's a little technical here, but biogas is produced, it's natural gas from organic waste. We find it on farms across the country. We find it in wastewater treatment plants and landfills. And today, the renewable fuel standard has an active pathway that would allow us to take those fugitive methane emissions and connect them to electric vehicles across the United States, very similar to our work in California. So before we jump in, just a little bit about what biogas is. And I'm going to read an excerpt from a letter that we led back in August 17th of 2018 during President Trump's first administration. Biogas facilities are an innovative best practice. This letter was signed by almost 70 family farms across the country. Biogas facilities are an innovative best practice, particularly in dairy and livestock agriculture. There is no other type of energy production, domestic or foreign, fossil or renewable, that produces as many economic and environmental benefits to farmers and their rural communities. One biogas facility can provide a farm with heat and renewable baseload electricity for its own needs, as well as additional revenue from the sale of electricity to the grid. A biogas facility also helps a farm manage manure, protect water resources, reduce ammonia and hydrogen sulfide emissions associated with livestock production, minimize or eliminate harmful pathogens such as E. coli, divert organic waste streams from landfills, produce beneficial and valuable sources of nutrients and organic matter for crops, and create attainable STEM jobs in rural communities, supporting their development. Switching gears, currently EPA has a public comment period open on the electric pathway and the renewable fuel standard. That public comment period closes on August the 8th. The current EPA administration has proposed removing the electric pathway entirely from our nation's only renewable fuel standard. In doing so, this action would, in my personal opinion, not follow the intention of the renewable fuel standard, which is support the development of domestic low carbon fuels, displacing fossil fuel-based foreign fuels. I think that we really have an opportunity here to weigh in and focus on the benefits that a robust, beneficial electrification of our rural communities could actually do for America. In my last couple minutes, I'm going to briefly read my EPA testimony, which served during our public comment period. It's about 3 minutes, but it gives you a little bit of context. Skipping to the good parts. The future of the electric pathway and its impact on American agriculture, rural communities, and our nation's energy independence is of national concern. The RFS program was designed to incentivize renewable biofuels, including those from biogas. In 2014, the EPA finalized regulations for electricity and RNG pathways. The only qualified biogas-derived non-liquid cellulosic biofuel. The RNG, the renewable natural gas pathway, has been successful, with EPA approvals projected to displace 800 million gallons of gasoline by 2026. However, many rural farms, and particularly rural areas, cannot access this RNG marketplace. Getting my sign to wrap up here, I will try to read this quickly. Due to the distance from natural gas pipelines and high upgrade costs. Conversely, the electric pathway is designed to allow farms, landfills, and other facilities to generate and supply electricity for transportation fuel, and it has not been activated. Although most farms are connected to the electric grid and can generate electricity on site, EPA has not approved any parties to supply RFS electricity. And in 2024, electricity used as transportation fuel displaced 1.5 billion gallons of gasoline, none of which was recognized by the RFS. May I? Currently, only 200 dairy and livestock farms generate electricity from biogas. The Department of Agriculture estimates that another 9,000 farms could be built with biogas digesters with the right incentives, and thousands more could be built at wastewater treatment plants and waste processing facilities. Despite bipartisan congressional support and direct appeals from family farmers and rural communities, in that letter I just read, the electric pathway remains inactive. The significant and growing foregone revenues from these facilities, coupled with competition from successful wind and solar projects, lowering the cost of electricity, highlight this urgency. These farms with digesters are shutting down. RFS program participation would provide crucial new revenue streams, sustaining existing rural jobs and creating thousands more. Removing the electric pathway from the program entirely would exclude these farms and facilities from the renewable transportation fuel market and, in a way, undermine a lot of the current administration's promises to rural America. Stop there. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. And you're exhibiting, so if people want to read the bad parts of the letter, can they stop by? No, I'm just teasing. That was
Yes.
good.
And we
The
have
whole thing is there. The whole thing
Yes.
is there. Next up is Jaquelin Cochran. We had an associate director of NREL in the previous lab, but one's just not enough. So, Jaquelin, we're happy to have you. Jaquelin is the associate lab director for strategic energy analysis and decision scientists at the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. Jaquelin, welcome to the panel.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for inviting me to this important communication and dialogue. As we think about our energy future, rural communities are not just a region to be served, but they're a strategic driver of our national energy policy. Rural communities have a disproportionate share of our energy infrastructure. They host the energy projects that fuel and power our cities. They host the transmission corridors that move electrons around. And they host the land where our energy resources are extracted and developed. Yet despite their central role in our energy economy, rural communities often experience energy policy as something that is done to them rather than with them. And there are several complexities at play with rural communities in terms of energy. One, and some of these have already been brought up, like rural electric utilities are co-ops. They're member-owned, often. They're member-owned, they're member-controlled. They often have to maintain more infrastructure per customer than their urban counterparts. They're located in areas that experience extreme weather and aging infrastructure. They typically operate with fewer specialized staff. And finally, there's limited local capital. But as these factors exist, rural utilities have to navigate increasingly complex decisions around energy procurement and grid modernization. And it's important to note that rural communities are not resistant to change. They're resourceful, they're pragmatic. We are seeing success stories where communities, that have been hit hard by agricultural change, deploy new energy technologies to create sources of revenue. And we've seen this, for example, in tribal locations as well, such as the Moapa Band of Paiute Indians in Nevada. They built a gigawatt of solar generation in partnership with the state of Nevada, city of Las Vegas, and industry. And the project generated new jobs. It also directly funded senior care and childhood education. And it's a fantastic example of energy development that translates directly into local economic development, which is important to show those direct benefits. What these success stories have in common are that they've often benefited from flexible funding mechanisms in a variety of sources, targeted technical assistance, capacity building for local decision makers to engage with state energy policy, and respect for the governance structures of rural communities. These are the factors that can make energy deployment successful and where policy really matters. So, for example, where I work, we help implement some of the Department of Energy's programs that provide technical assistance to rural co-ops and also to communities through our Energy to Communities program. They allow local communities, these programs sort of allow and enable folks to participate in energy decision-making, such as providing them the information that they need to participate by having folks come to them in their existing meetings to meet them where they are, to help walk through different energy scenarios and how to help think about trade-offs. So we really want the rural communities to be driving and owning any of this change. And sometimes it just takes having, some special, just some extra education. So if you don't have a specialized workforce, you may not have information on different procurement options. So it's a matter of helping illustrate what's out there. So I think I can wrap up.
Okay.
Just wait for the questions at this point.
Questions are incoming. That was great. Thank you. Thank you very much for that set of presentations. So as usual, we will have time for Q&A. But to get us started, I want to come back, and Doug, maybe we could start with you on this one. I want to come back to this idea of, sort of the rural energy burden. Energy is expensive for everybody, but it is more expensive for rural families, rural households, rural small businesses. And something that's come up on a lot of other panels, and I know some of you have been here for some of the other panels, is the discussions around the proliferation of data centers. Mm-hmm. A lot of those are going in urban or ex-urban and rural areas. And so as more pressure is being put on rural households with energy prices, how can energy efficiency and renewable energy, or how could it better help alleviate some of those concerns around the placement of those data centers and lower energy bills for those families and small businesses?
That's great. That's a great question. I know that's as you suggested just from the conversations earlier today, but I know for those rural electric cooperatives, other players in rural places, this is if not one of the biggest issues that they're facing. It's an issue. It's also an opportunity. But how to make sure that rural places kind of manage this opportunity so that some of the most vulnerable in those rural communities, maybe at least are not hurt, if not take advantage. And I think the example that you provided, that Ben provided a little bit earlier, is a good example of how to manage the load and how to manage demand. There are a lot of utilities, rural electric cooperatives that are very leaning forward in helping their members manage when the electricity can be used. And that's through smart grid primarily, which, as an aside, emphasizes the importance of broadband in rural places and for rural communities to be able to participate in the modern economy, including in the information economy. And here's an example of how that information economy means data centers, which will require huge new investments for the utilities. And what needs to be managed is that as those investments are paid for over time, how to use the best technology and practices around energy efficiency so that those households can really manage those costs as they come down the line. So that's a good question.
Thanks, Doug. Ben, same question to you. I'm curious what you have to say.
I totally agree that the use of demand response as a way of reducing the peak load electricity consumption by co-ops has been used for a long time, but I think will become even more important as a way of ensuring customer electricity bills don't go up. And I think it was covered some on prior panels, but the peak load issue is really one that a tremendous percent of the utilities costs come from meeting electricity demand during the peak hours. I'm sure Jaquelin probably has better statistics on this, but I know for some utilities, it's something like the top 10% of the hours. The top 10% equates to something like 40% of the cost. So if you can cut down on the amount of electricity you're using during those 10% of the most expensive hours, you're going to really dramatically reduce the overall utility bills. Using your water heater, charging your water heater when not during those peak periods is one great example. Charging your electric vehicle, because on a farm, for example, you could use various utility vehicles. Those could be electrified, which is great. But making sure that you are charging them when electricity prices are low is another important step. So just being smarter about how we use electricity is a huge opportunity.
And Mike, same question to you. Now, you work with different technologies than buildings necessarily, but I'm curious what you think.
Yeah, we actually see this a lot in California. So I mentioned that our core business is generating credits, but eventually, what else can you do with data off of 500,000 vehicles? So now, yes, managed charging is something that pretty much every single EV driver is interested in. This automates the process. And we've seen really a blending of the smart thermostat and the smart car. And when particular utilities do that, especially when dynamic grids, which is ERCOT currently in the United States, they're able to offer someone, up to 20, I think 25% off their utility bill by signing up for these programs. And then I guess just briefly on the rural side, one of the farms that we work with in California, Strauss Family Creamery, it's about 30 minutes north of San Francisco. Hey.
You better get it right.
Well, so Strauss Family Creamery, they're actually one of the first smaller farms that really leaned into electrification. So they electrified some of their farm equipment, but where they really save is the electricity coming off their digester, because having to run things you wouldn't think about, fans to cool livestock at peak utility rate, that's a major cost. And can turn some of these smaller farms upside down.
Okay. And Jaquelin, same question to you. Curious what you're seeing in sort of this potential.
Yeah, rural areas, as I was saying earlier, they cover a broad geographic area with older infrastructure in some cases, and so it's expensive to upgrade if there's new demand. So energy efficiency has more of an outsized value compared to urban areas. The co-ops do not want to raise rates. And, so if there are other ways, again, to control the peak demand or other drivers of when they might need to make those upgrades, it can have a lot of benefit.
Great, thanks. Questions in the room? My friend Aaron has the microphone. She'd be happy to take it over to you if you have a question. Otherwise, I'm going to ask another one. All right, here we go. So, Ben, maybe we'll start with you this time so that poor Doug isn't always having to go first. But curious about if are there special barriers, or are there particular barriers that you've come across in rural areas that policymakers should think about as they're coming up with policies that, without, stereotyping rural areas too much or making too many generalizations, are there barriers that you think are a little bit more common that if we could bring those down, maybe we'd see more clean energy deployment in rural areas?
I think the key issues are probably, cost of putting in new equipment, cost of a lot of co-ops have existing generation and they may still be paying off the costs on those. Adding new generation may be great. Maybe it's cheaper to run at each moment, but it doesn't necessarily solve the cost problem of the existing generation that the co-op is still paying off. So helping with that cost transition is certainly a big piece. Similarly, the cost of putting in, for example, a heat pump, if a homeowner was using a propane system, that's going to have a big upfront cost. It's going to pay for itself over time, but taking on the upfront cost is challenging, and co-ops can help with that. But also, that's a place where federal support can be particularly valuable.
Great, thanks. Mike, same question to you. Are there special barriers that exist in rural areas that maybe make it harder, for the kinds of technologies that you're working on to really take place or to really catch on?
Yeah, and I think I mentioned that the biggest one before is just they're not near any other infrastructure other than electricity. So, I mean, that's really the focus. The larger farms and facilities closer and less in rural areas, they will have access to those pipelines. We do have a good infrastructure there. And I think also just knowledge. Biogas generally is unknown, unthought of. What I see is, tech transfer really through anaerobic digester technologies, tech transfer to farms, and then through that, farmer agency. Because when we talk to some of the farms that do know, they're able to produce food, fuel, and fiber off their own land. And there's a lot of autonomy in that.
Yeah. And Jaquelin, same question to you. Barriers that you see in your work that if they could come down, maybe we'd have, sort of more affordable, more accessible clean energy in rural areas.
A lot of the co-ops don't have any experience owning generation, so they contract with other wholesale providers. Their focus is on distributing the generation to homes. And so when we're thinking about, can they do a renewable energy project or something like that, they may not have the experience owning generation. So it's suddenly changing the types of business models they've considered. They might have contracts with wholesale providers that cap the amount of renewable generation that can occur within their territory, and if they exceed that, they get hit with financial penalties. I would also say because the boards are made up of local residents, they're not necessarily energy professionals, and so you are working with folks who really want to participate and understand their options, but don't have that sort of depth of specialized staff that you see at larger utilities.
Great. And Doug?
Just three real quick ones at the risk of being a little bit repetitive. The tailored capacity, because rural places do have their, in two ways. One, their human resource capacity can be different just because they're small. Some of them are quite small, so they don't have a staff of technical professionals necessarily. Also, the point about the board, it's a beautiful thing for a utility to be controlled by a board of the people who use it as opposed to outside investors. But the result is that the board doesn't necessarily have that deep technical knowledge. So again, that means that that there needs to be better technical assistance. There's awesome legacy technical assistance from USDA Rural Utility Service that's really tailored for that. But then as we move into some of these other technologies, the other kind of service providers in the ecosystem really needs to think about how to engage with rural places. And then the last one I'd mention is, and I mentioned before, in some places, thankfully, those places, the list is getting smaller, but it's still significant, is broadband, particularly in Native American country, some of the more rural and remote places. And if you don't have broadband on a lot of what we're talking about, they just can't participate at all. So.
I was also thinking about workforce
in
terms of training opportunities, but also just the number of people you need to,
Right.
support an energy efficiency economy or an electrification economy. Having to contractors having to travel large distances starts to become harder. Questions in the audience? Oh, we have one up here in the front. Thanks.
I wanted to ask if you're seeing, are you seeing any synergies with agriculture in those areas? Because I know there's also concern in a lot of rural communities about the use of agricultural land for the other people.
We can start with you, Jaquelin, and then we can hear from others too if they want.
Sure. Yeah, we have a lot of ongoing research about agrivoltaics, and so for folks who aren't familiar, it's combining, for example, like solar power with other agricultural land uses, whether it's crop growing or animal husbandry. There's a mix of experience. I mean, there are tons of amazing experiences with this and being able to diversify funding sources in locations. There is also sometimes concern that companies are putting up solar panels and some goats and sort of greenwashing whatever their business is to say that. So it's like all things, there's a range out there of how this is working out in practice, but certainly, and same with, you also have those opportunities with wind in rural areas and having co-uses of land. So I'm a big fan of anything where you can diversify your income on locations, and some of our research is getting into questions like, all right, how high up do the panels need to be where you can still get sunlight to the crops below and get your mowers in and things like that. So there's a lot of good research out there, and I'm anticipating that this is a growing area, but not without its challenges.
Other comments on the panel about agrivoltaics, but also maybe the broader point about using agricultural lands for energy generation? Go ahead, Mike.
Sure. Yes. So I'm involved with a few projects actually supplying power to data centers in Texas. And that's often the landowners. They want to see that land stay true to its purpose and add capacity to generate power to it. So in Texas, due to the climate, it's interesting agrivoltaics and how far they're lifted up above. We've actually seen it provide shade for animals, and that's just a huge game changer, especially shade that is financed.
Mm-hmm. Great. Ben or Doug, thoughts? Great. All right, we've got a question over here in the corner.
So much a question as much as a statement.
Well, we like questions more than statements.
I built agrivoltaic facilities. You use sheep, but sheep don't eat wires. They just graze. They do two things. They graze, they sit in the shade like cows do. They like the panels. And they also leave a lot behind. So they fertilize the land, certain plants they love. It's a great solution for farmers. Farmers love to have alternative sources of income. It's a great solution. Yeah, and she
Fair.
cute.
And delicious. Oops. Other questions from the audience? I've got a whole bunch more I could add. Oh, sure, go ahead, please.
Anyone, is there any potential upcoming technology or development that might move forward to help rural areas?
So just in case the mic didn't pick that up, the question was about emerging technologies or new technologies that might be coming online. I'll open this one up for anyone, but anything you're really excited
Start
about on
with
the
NREL.
horizon? Yeah, probably NREL should start with this one.
We can talk about microgrids as an example. The ability to control microgrids are a nice way to take a few different resources in a rural area and provide steady power. And I think compared to the old days, the more modern types of microgrids are just better able to on the energy management. Like you don't want all the demand to come at once. You are trying to figure out how to, optimize when your battery is charging or dispatching on the grid. And so the controls are becoming a lot more advanced in making microgrids effective, and that can be a very useful rural America technology. And we have partnerships. We've got, especially like I know of some in near us in Colorado, in rural parts of Colorado that are able to keep energy costs down through microgrid technologies.
Other thoughts on the panel? Go ahead, Ben.
So this is really channeling the earlier panel that I had the pleasure to watch on next generation technologies. But just one thing that we've been doing a big picture shift on is away from coal and toward other generation sources. And a lot of those coal plants are located in rural areas. And I do think they're sort of some interesting ideas, and I'm not saying they're going to come to fruition or not, but of repowering or putting in new generation sources at the same locations of a coal plant that's coal closing. One idea that is attractive and was addressed earlier on a panel was some advanced geothermal technologies where you might be able to drill far deeper and get a very hot rock, and that could be used at the same location of a coal plant, and basically in addition to providing the power and using the existing infrastructure, you would be also providing employment where a coal plant had presumably been a strong employer within those communities. Similar panelists talked about advanced nuclear plants. Some of these go under the acronym SMRs, small modular reactors, and you could either build another one of those in Wyoming. There's a proposal to do that at the site of a coal plant that's closing. Potentially even reuse some of the coal plant infrastructure, like the boiler and such, if you can manage to make the nuclear plant, fit in and provide the heat for that. I don't not expert enough to know how feasible that is or not, but it's an intriguing idea.
There's a panelist on our 4 o'clock panel from Idaho National Lab, and that person might know a little bit more about that because they do a lot of nuclear work. And then INL is also exhibiting, and so I know that coal to nuclear in particular is something that I think they are doing some really interesting work on. So that could be another lead for you as well. Great. We have, I think, you're our last question of the panel. So thank you.
Gosh, this is embarrassing. I'm heading out to Alaska to soon work on microgrids in rural communities, and I was wondering, are there any alternative funding mechanisms that are coming out, or like some innovative ways to get money to these places that, with all the cuts in the federal government, might be like tribal solar programs and stuff like that?
That's a great question.
That is a good question.
Go ahead, Ben.
I don't have one right off the top of my head.
I mean, I guess the one area that I think is maybe still has funding available is the USDA, some of their programs. I think maybe compared to some of the DOE ones, maybe are still plugging away. I don't know if those are taking new applications or not, but I think they're still they're sort of were reviewed, but they're still being processed, as I understand it. And they may have additional money available. I don't know.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts there? All right. Oh, go ahead.
I mean, the ETIP program, I'm not sure what funding comes out of it, but it's, I don't remember the acronym, but it's for remote communities.
Great. Thanks. What's that? Do you have a question?
Oh, he might have an answer to that.
He might actually have a question. So this gentleman gets a little special treatment because he's a former USDA person. So he might have an answer.
Former USDA from High Energy Cochran, which is a $10 million program that is specifically set up at Stevens of Alaska. The requirements are fairly stringent in that you have to be in a community that has more than 275% of the national average for energy costs, that would be gas, whatever. But that's the barrier to entry. And it's a critical program for very, very rural areas. We're High Energy Cost Grant program. Look it up on the USD.
Thanks, Bob. All right, well, that brings us to time, and I'd like to say a special thanks to Doug and Ben and Mike and Jaquelin for being great panelists on our Rural Energy panel today.